Yann's here tonight to talk about Scrum. I mean, I'd love you to talk about giant underwater robots, actually, but...
I will. Spoiler alert.
But Scrum is good as well. Please give Yann a really warm welcome. I'm sure he will finish off anything that I've not mentioned just now.
So, yes, Scrum. Just a little bit of audience participation. Can you raise your hand if you've ever been in a Scrum team or did any Scrum Master role or anything like that? Right, okay. Now, keep it up. Now, put your hands down if you haven't read the Scrum guide cover to cover. The latest one. Okay. Now, put your hand down if you haven't been in a team which runs Scrum, which haven't implemented every single thing in that guide. Okay, right? Thank you for some people have still their hands up. We'll get back to this in about half an hour. So Scrum introspection, what lies in the shadow. So I thought I'd do it too long, didn't read as first. There you go. Scrum is bad. I'm really here at an Agile event telling you that your baby's ugly. Yeah! So this is what the emotional response I was looking for. Laughter is better. But Anita Sarkeesian said something that we can be critical of the things that we love. That is possible. Now, she did a critique of the game industry from a feminist point of view and got a ton of hate for it. Hopefully you won't all hate me at the end of this talk. But if you do, it's a service I provide for free. So what I'm going to try to do is to give you some reasoning, some evidence. We'll even try to do some science. And hopefully get somewhere that we can take, that the takeaway is, wow, Scrum is maybe not as good as we think it is, or maybe not a silver bullet. So I'll go through three main things through this. The first one is history of Scrum and Agile, how it came about. Second is the external factors which make Scrum bad, and then the internal factors which make Scrum bad. This is a criticism of Scrum, so I'm afraid you're not going to hear much good about Scrum, because you know the good about Scrum, right? You've all been doing Scrum. Hopefully. So the history of Scrum. So where did Agile start? Agile started to address the development practice of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And as I say there, that's the stuff nightmares are made from. So for everyone who's not as old as me, software used to be made by a software architect who would write UML diagrams of every single class, every single variable, every single method this class had, how they interacted with every other things. And they used to have this in big diagrams, which barely fitted on their 30-inch monitors, or 20-inch monitors. And then they'd write down words of description of functions. So the function is named this, it takes these variables, which are named this, that types, it produces these results, it gives these error messages for each things which go wrong. Once this architecture was done, it would go through several stages of review process. Then it would be printed on paper and dumped on developers' desk. And developers could get 200 pages of this stuff on the desk, and then they start writing code. And developers were not specialized. You wrote C or C++ or Java or whatever, and you just write it. You'd write the code, making sure you had everything as in that piece of paper. And sometimes the secretary would come in and go, hey, here's a new version. And you'd go back. Now, once all the code was written, it was put together in a compiler and compiled. And then people found out that it didn't work. What a shock. So they take those bugs and give them back to developers, which of course probably would be new developers who joined the company after the guys who wrote this code moved on to a different company, probably doing HTML tables and this whole new .com boom. So in '95, Sutherland and Schwaber put in Scrum as an applied Agile, and those are the problems that Agile was meant to solve. And if you don't know those problems, consider yourself lucky, because it was awful. It was terrible. And for 30 years, it ushered a new paradigm of software development. Probably towards the turn of the century, so 2000 over, it became actually popular and people started using it. So it's been 30 years. So what has changed? Mobile devices didn't exist then. And towards the 2000s, we had phones, which just did phones. And if you wanted a ringtone, you had to use a MIDI file. And if you don't know what a MIDI file, again, you're lucky. And now we have devices which we can access the sum total of human knowledge in our pockets. Sure, we use them to look at a picture of cute cats, but that's beyond the point. Internet at home. You used to go in at home, put your phone on a modem, and pay 10 pence a minute for 56K. Yeah, that was how it was done. Now I'm downloading 120 gigs of game patch. Sorry, I'm still bitter about that. Architectures, everything was enclaved. There was no SaaS. The cloud was this amazing thing which nobody knew about and nobody thought about and didn't exist. Enclaves, yeah, perfect. You had offices like this one and you had machine rooms. And in the machine rooms, you had computers. And that was if you were lucky. Otherwise, it was the computer on the desk nobody's using, which was your server. SaaS was just a thing which didn't exist. Distributed version control. Right, so you're writing code, and you had your repository, and you could check out a file, which would log that file to you and you personally, so only you could edit it. You'd do an edit, and then you'd push your changes and unlock the file. And the next person could pick that file and do things. Unless you went on holiday for 2 weeks, having locked your file, and then nobody could work on that file for 2 weeks, unless the nice system admin come down from their throne room and unlock the file for you. The idea of merging code, oh, that was sweet. No. So first we had SVN, which allowed you to use branch, then Git, etc. UML and reams of documentation are dead and buried. Yay! We're so happy. Developers are now specialized. Got developers specialized in mobile, in front end, in back end, in developers in test, in automation. Every developer now has a very specific role and can't do any of the other roles or can do them badly. CI/CD. Completely new concept, which are revolutionizing software engineering. Again, those are new, and there's a strong correlation between successful software and using CI/CD. That's from the DORA, the State of DevOps report of last year. There's new secure development life cycles for software, things which came from Scrum. We've all seen the infinity spiral with the DevOps things. Those stuff didn't exist 30 years ago. Talking about that, shift left. Both operation and cybersecurity, pulling it into the sprints, into that early development, makes things better and cheaper. The whole DevOps culture makes software more robust because developers have suddenly to have to think about how this software is going to be run. DevSecOps now is making the same shifts with cybersecurity. You can't just pull a dependency out of thin air. No, security has a word about that. Software quality assurance. It improves software quality. Testing was not done at all, ever. What testing was done is when the final product was running. So this is Scrum. I think you all recognize it as Scrum. It's from 1995. And it's still Scrum as today. Yes, things have changed. The Scrum meeting is now called a daily stand-up. The definitions of role has changed. But that's it. Why not? Why hasn't it changed? Why? Is it the perfect methodology for everything? Having seen all those new technologies which are out there? So there are some external issues why Scrum is bad. These are the things which are kind of outside of Scrum and development teams and that whole ecosystem. So first of all, there's Dark Scrum. Join the dark side. It's just badly implemented, right? Stop. Stop saying it's badly implemented. If something is so complicated, it can be misconstrued so badly, then maybe it's kind of your fault for not explaining it right. Sun Tzu had an interesting story about that. When he was teaching a whole bunch of courtesans how to be soldiers, he explained something, it was quite simple, and they just laugh at him because they're just going, we're courtesans, we're not soldiers. So he said, if the general explains something badly, explains something and the troops don't understand it, clearly it's the general's fault. The rest of the story is a bit more gruesome, so I'll pass on that. The Agile crowd as well. Generally used by senior leadership to just go, oh yeah, Agile. All my mates are talking about Agile. Yeah, we Agile. We hire some Scrum Masters. Yeah, you've all been there. And it's used to cut corners. So they hear, hey, communication of a documentation. It means we can stop doing documentation at all. Yeah? Planning is no longer needed. You self-organize, we just throw work your way and you do it. Amazing. Dark Scrum. And the focus on velocity is another thing. It's senior management like to know when things are going to be done. And when there's any delay, they blame the developers because they're not going to blame themselves. And Agile give them, or Scrum give them a perfect vehicle for that. On the sense, Scrum has a reputation, deserved or not, to overpromises and under-deliver. That's not true, but it's a reputation it has. And leadership needs to understand that they only have two levels to control. They have a number of features and release date, and those two are linked. And that's it. And Scrum is now used as a wrapper to Agile, and the certification which came out of a way of making money out of Scrum has not improved matters, because now people hire someone who is a certified Scrum Master and just go, there you go, you do Scrum. We're still going to dump work on you and put unexpected, not unexpected, unreasonable expectation on you, but you're doing Scrum, you're Agile, you can cope with this. No. And Agile has a view of having an awful lot of dogma, of making rules up, making stuff up, and it starts to feel a little bit like a cult to people. And frankly, if you want to join a cult, I've got a perfect person to talk about my religion. It's not my religion. So now on the internal issues, I think this is the most important part of this talk. It is about the core of Scrum and what Scrum does badly. So Scrum is fairly rigid. Now, when I ask you to put down your hand if you implemented all Scrum, because Scrum says the Scrum framework outlined herein is immutable. While implementing only part of Scrum is possible, the result is not Scrum. I checked, it's still in the latest one. I had trouble finding it, it's right at the bottom. Contrast this to communication over rigid processes. Okay? So Scrum is breaking Agile straight away by saying, you implement all of Scrum or you're not doing Scrum, and you're not Agile. Well, how about no? You can do both. There's the issue of scales. Now, I had the chance to work in tiny startups and in big corporations. Scrum looks very different when you have 2 developers and you have to do everything, or when you have 50 developers and they're broken down in teams which do their own things and things. So this is why you have a rise of Scrums of Scrum or SAFe or things like this, which try to bridge that gap at the high end. But the low end is not really explored at all. At my last startup, there was 1 mobile guy, 1 web guy, 2 backends, well, 1 backend and half a backend and half a DevOps, which was me. That was it. 4 people. This is dropping into my next point. All members of a Scrum team can pick any tasks. That's blatantly not true. I can't pick a mobile task. I have no idea how to program in Flutter. I wouldn't know even where to start. In the same way, the Flutter dev had no idea what Kubernetes was. I mean, he'd heard of it, but what's a pod? What's a secret? Oh, it's a secret. It's a Kubernetes secret. It must be secure, right? Yeah. No, so that's plainly not true. So if you have a group, even of developers which are all full stack developers, they can do everything. You have a bunch of SQA people. What are they doing at the beginning of your sprint? Nothing. What are they doing at the end? Everything. Yeah? Of course, that's not how sprints work, because you pull in work from the previous sprint and work spill over to the next sprint, but that's not Scrum as defined in the guide. User story as requirements. I like user stories because they push you to do 2 things. 1, have a clear definition of done, and 2, produce something valuable for your users, which is kind of what you're trying to do to get money into the business. My problem with user stories is business debt is not explored through a user story. As a developer, I want to refactor this code because it makes my head hurt. Okay, yes, you can do this, but it's kind of abusing that nomenclature. It's a bug. As a user, this bug is annoying the living daylight out of me, please fix it. Again, doesn't work. So there's a lot of abuse of a nomenclature, despite having some really, really good idea. The INVEST acronym is brilliant. Making tasks conform to it is great. The idea of having a clear definition of done, perfect. The idea of having 3 amigos talking about it, or maybe 4 amigos or 5 amigos, depending on what the task is. I do a lot of cybersecurity. A very dear friend of mine does a lot of operation. We kind of want to get involved early because you've written this lovely thing, this lovely microservice, who talks to a database, right? Does it talk to a database? Fantastic. What happens if there's no database? Does it just sit there eating CPU cycles more and more trying to reconnect? Does it buffer things and then just opens floodgate as soon as the database is back up? Does it just crash? What does it do when that database goes away? Because the database will go away. You've pulled on this amazing dependency. It's amazing. It's fantastic. It does everything you want. Your code is now 10 times cleaner. And security just goes, do you realize that the developer of that has a environment variable called put it is a bitch, which has to be set to true? Are you sure we want this into production so our customers can see it? Whatever you think of put in, it's probably not something security is going to let through. There was a package of JavaScript at the beginning of the Ukraine war, which would check your IP address, and if your IP address was in a block in Russia, would delete your hard drive. Now, maybe someone is going to do that with the US. Are you sure you want to release that to your customers? Because if any of them are in the US or Israel or anywhere, they may have word with you. So, user stories, problematic. The next two are probably, if you only remember one thing from my talk, is these 2 points. Right? The rejection of upfront generalization is bad. I'm not advocating going back to writing UML. God, no, please don't. That's insane. But understanding that, hey, this will need to scale. Right? What if we're successful? What if we don't get 1,000 customers? What if we get 10,000 or 100,000 or 100 million? Oh yeah, how is that going to work? Maybe think about that before you start coding things. Are you going to waste your time sometimes? Yeah, sure. There's a great example of that Y Combinator use about go fast, which is Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go came out, everybody downloaded it, it wasn't playable. Nobody could connect, nobody could do anything, yes, heads nodding. Why? Because they didn't think it would be popular. I mean, seriously, it's Pokemon. Come on. Of course it's going to be popular. The tagline is collect them all. You know, there's a user base there. But still, the complete mess it up had to rush around for a month and put it out there. If it was any other thing but Pokemon, dead. Right? Look at the experience CD Projekt Red had with Cyberpunk 2077. They released it after much delay. It was a bag of spanners, and they got so much hate for years. Now it's playable. Great. But it's several years later, and thankfully they have a backlog of fans which will keep up with this. But if it was anybody else, they'd be dead in the water. Not having a lot of upfront generalization increased business debt. Now, what's business debt? Business debt is what I call tech debt, because it's not a techie issue, it's a business issue. And if you use business debt, people who have money and their leadership will go, hang on, that's important to me. What do you mean, debt? Do I get interest? And you go, oh yeah, it's brutal. You know, the Templar Knights didn't have interest like that. So you're increasing it. Now, Lewis had a fantastic thing about having tech debt or business debt in your sprint. Yeah, if you're in a startup and you tell your VC, we're gonna spend 40% of our time looking at tech debt, they're gonna go, how about you don't and you release? Yeah? Because we've invested 12 million in you and where's my money? So that business debt sabotages future work. And spending a little time planning that work and planning things up front will help you. Again, not massive amount. You know, we don't want to go back to UML. The other one is a rejection of documentation. DORA, the State of DevOps 2024, has a strong correlation between good documentation and good software quality. It's a correlation, it's not causation. It means that the people who write good software write good documentation, maybe. Or if you write a piece of software and you write good documentation, you make your software better because you realize how bad it actually is and how incoherent it is. And if you've ever tried to explain what you do to somebody, like, you know, programmer's confession, you find out where the problems are. In documentation, once you finish your piece of code, your new microservice, and you push it to DevOps, they're going to ask you, where's the runbook for this? What do we do when it baths all over the floor and takes down our entire Kubernetes cluster? Are we going to wake you up? Back to the drawing board. So I have seen documentation, in code documentation, that every single line of code had to be commented, had to have comment. Every single line of code had to be excised by 2 different tests. Why? Because they've been building machines which inject morphine into cancer patients. Right? You get that wrong, you kill somebody, or you make them have a lot of pain. Documentation is important. Now, hopefully none of you will ever have to write code like this, but I wrote code for giant underwater robots. These things have legs which wouldn't even fit into this room, right? These legs are controlled by a hydraulic pump, which puts out 400 bars of pressure. It goes through a human like it goes through air. It will make no difference to the running of a tool, right? The documentation we need to do and the testing we need to do around this is super important, because crushing somebody to death is not something which is on my CV, and it's something I don't want on my CV ever. So you need a certain level of documentation. I always said, what's the best level of documentation for a developer? Well, it's a level of documentation you want to say, here, Mr. Judge, not me. About release of software, we had talk about release. So Scrum does release every sprint. Why? Again, DORA, which is the science bit, has a very strong correlation between multiple releases a day and good software. Fantastic if you can do it. Great, brilliant. You have amazing CI, you have amazing CD, it's perfect. Right, now you work with the MOD. You have 2 weeks in a year to update your stuff. You miss it, tough, next year. You build a giant underwater robot. Guess what? You can release every day, 10 times a day. The robot is built in 3 months. Won't bother. Just do a release and release it on the robot and then fix all the problems. In fact, a very common cause of failure on robots is left leg, or aft leg and port leg are controlled by output A and B. Cool. The electric diagram says it. Everything says it. You've coded it in. You wrote the unit test. You run the simulator. Perfect. You go on site, install the software, press the aft leg, and the port leg goes up. And you go, what? So you talk to the engineer who says, oh yeah, because they shove the control box the other way around, so it's easier to actually mount in and out. So now the two cables would cross, and it means that you can't close that panel. So B is going there, A is going there. Yeah, all right, well, I'll change that in code then, because it's easier. My wife works as a QA for safety critical software. It's software which is designed to test that the software which is put on plane is properly tested. All right? They can't release anything in less than 2 weeks. They have to manually observe the CI running. Why? Because the regulation says you have to. They have checklists to fill, manual checklist on paper of going, yep, seen this, seen that, yep, they've followed the procedure. It takes time. And again, trust me, Boeing is not going to update the software every day. It's going to take them time because they need to fill 24 forms to get their software updated. They have to talk to security, and security is overworked and is going to tell them, go away. We just qualified this software 4 years ago. Stop bothering with me. But it's been 4 years. I've got this stuff to do. So if you have customers and enclave software, if they have their own little patch thing and their own things, and they will want to do things at their own pace. And sometimes there's just literally no point in releasing software because it will just sit somewhere, and then they'll go, last version was 3.12. The new version is 3.306. What are the other version in between? What are you doing? So yeah, release every sprint. Why? Why? Makes no sense. Oh, and especially if half your stories are from the previous sprint are moving in your current sprint, which have pushed half the story of this sprint into the next sprint. That was one of mine. So is Scrum really that bad? Yeah. Boo. Nah, you won't make it work. You're smart people, it worked. And you should, maybe, works sometimes, doesn't work sometimes. Personally, I think we should reform. And Agile fix the problems of last century software development. Can it fix the problems it created? Can it? How would you go about fixing the problems with Agile? I've outlined a whole bunch of problems. How are you going to fix them?
Talk to people.
Talk to people.
Put questions back into the industry.
Yeah.
Make people accountable for their actions.
What else?
Self-management things. Goal-orientated tasks.
Yeah.
I think that we really a lot of the dogma lines on Scrum. It was interesting that some people thought they had implemented everything on Scrum, which we put in the back bits, all the stuff. So everybody in Scrum, only said all those once. There needs to be a mission that outside perfect organisation. And you need to know it's going to be public and 5% of engineers, it's impossible to do a skill
I think a lot of the industry for a long time has been really lazy about what Agile is really about. And I think they haven't really adopted the mindset, and it's always been around about following the process. I think the way to fix this is to understand there is no one book or one way, and you need to understand all of the different facets of software delivery and actually what software delivery is for. It's not about moving as fast as you can, it's actually about how you generate value for your customer. So I think we need to move away from there being a Scrum implementation or an XP implementation or a safe implementation. Like, what about lean? And how do we introduce lots of other aspects that you touched on? It involves effort. Like, you actually really need to understand the cross-functional nature of the work you're doing. And it's not just about delivery or how you deliver as frequently as you possibly can without blowing up. There's all these other aspects. And I think people need to recognize that it's complex, and that's why we get paid what we get paid, because it is complex, and we need to lean into the fact that you need to understand your craft truly. And because we are working in cross-functional teams, there needs to be a cross-functional method to deliver great solutions. And sometimes that solution doesn't even involve code, and it could be a reduction of code or removal of code. And so I think the answer is people just got to stop being lazy and think that you can swallow a pill or read a short guide and that's going to solve all your problems. You actually really need to understand what you're doing as part of your domain, your business, and then adapt your processes to suit what your business is trying to do. The process should be working for us, it shouldn't really be working for the process. So in short, we've got to stop being lazy and actually really understand what we're really trying to do and then find the tools to support that.
Business agility, that's something that a lot of people are talking about. So we talk about being agile for project development, but the whole business needs to understand it's not, they're going to be agile, they're going to understand it and support the development of the product. So agile at all levels, I think that's similar to what you're getting at actually. So there is a big move for business agility, the whole organisation understanding it, supporting it.
Yeah, I go.
I don't know whether or not there's any other Scrum Masters in the room, but I'm a Scrum Master.
Sorry. I've roasted your baby.
No, not at all, because I completely agree.
Oh, good.
And the only reason I'm a Scrum Master by title is because that's what people put out as a job description. And it's really frustrating for me because I look at Scrum and kind of take bits from it that I like. And then I look at Lean and I take bits that I like from there. And I look at Kanban and I go, right, okay, depending on the squad, the type of product that I'm working, how can I craft, So I just think Scrum is a tool in my toolbox. And it's down to pragmatism on how I apply that to be able to live. I live by the value of incrementally delivering value and getting that fast feedback and ensure collaboration and communication. I would love a different job title.
Yeah, yeah, Woody.
Well, you'll be lucky because a lot of the Scrum Masters I know have got new jobs. They're called Agile Delivery Leads now, so that is the shift in the industry, I think. For me, it's a cultural thing. The founders of Scrum said, it's on record somewhere, that it's a methodology that works between grown-ups. And what you have in business is very few people in the business, because we have different departments with different goals. There's very few actual grown-ups. And when I was hired for one company as a Scrum Master, the consultants we were working with, very good consultants, very, very wise, says, we're going to run Scrum to the rule book. We're actually going to run Scrum. We're not going to break the rules of Scrum. We're going to run as it says. You've got to follow every principle of Scrum, otherwise you're not Scrum. And we did that in development, and it lasted about 2 months because the rest of the company didn't culturally come with us. And then we had, the client wants us by Tuesday, and basically slowly eroded all the processes because we were the only ones committed to those processes. For the benefits those processes can bring, the rest of the business didn't come with us, even though they'd signed up to come with us. They just thought we could go faster, have less documentation, less planning, and therefore we had more chaos.
Dog Scrum.
Rather, yeah. And with all the best will in the world, a small group of Scrum Masters can't make that change. It's got to be the whole company goes that way.
Okay.
So I could be described as a self-hating scrummist. So my approach, it's the weirdest job because you find that you sometimes working against sometimes the individual that hired you because they use the language. And I found the language to be a problem. So part of what I do at work is sort of actively campaigning against Scrum, which is weird being a Scrum Master. It's not like, oh, we're betting Scrum's trap. It's just some manager is saying the word and you keep saying that word, but I don't think you know what it means. So it's like if someone's saying sprint, I'm like, yeah, it's not sprint, so we're not saying that word. It's a fortnight, what you're describing, or whatever it might be. So, my approach has been to the idea was that it gave us a common language to start with. There's so much baggage that we sort of rebelled against. We'll talk about what it really is and just look at improvements. And there'll be some ideas taken from Scrum, but because of that end note, I was like, it's not Scrum, so we're not using that language. That was my approach. I don't know if it's universally based.
Hang on.
Yeah, I think the perception is a bit faulty. So I would say, over the years, people think Scrum is Agile is Scrum, but it's truly not. Agile is a methodology, same as traditional waterfall. But because stakeholders, like you said in your earlier slide, that we want to be agile. So for some businesses, it's a buzzword that makes them feel cool. And as a Scrum Master, like she said, it's been a struggle trying to change that mindset with impatient stakeholders, right? Because they believe Scrum is a magic wand and it does what we want it to do because, yeah, you're agile, but the true definition of agile, the dictionary meaning, should be flexibility. So you should be empowered or you should try as much as possible to use all the, framework in the agile toolbox to meet the requirements of your project. And I think it solves the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yann, where to start now? I don't know where to start. So as the organiser of this group, or one of the principal organisers of this group, I do feel, absolutely, I spent a lot of my time, maybe talking about things like Scrum in a, not completely complimentary way, let's say, but, and I would say that mature teams, they don't need Scrum, they don't need Kanban. Mature teams know the principles that make them deliver and can adapt, based on their experience and the environment they're in. However, I would say there should be some acknowledgement that some of the things that Scrum is often criticised for, and I criticise for, in terms of it being quite prescriptive, as you've described now, some of those things are also its strengths, and there should be some acknowledgement that Scrum has largely transformed an industry over a course of 20 years. And
30.
There's a certain 30 years, yeah. And there's a point in time when I think that there has to be a prescriptive mechanism. I mean, the way I often describe things like Scrum, and I think it's true also of other agile frameworks, is they're kind of solving two problems. One of the problems, kind of the easier of the problems, is what's a commercially effective way to build software. And you're right, I think in small teams, kind of you can do anything and be successful. Large teams, it's a different thing. But still, the way building software in a commercially effective way for me is kind of the easier problem. The harder problem is, how do you get thousands of people who used to do it a different way to now come in on Monday and transform the way they do it? And actually, I think, being quite prescriptive is one of the ways that can be more effective in that way. So that's what I would say.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say I'm a professional Scrum trainer with Scrum.org. I'm a Scrum Master, an Agile coach. And Scrum is a conversation framework. It's not a methodology. It doesn't tell you how to do stuff. It's a framework, it's a conversation. As long as you're having the right conversations, hopefully the right things are coming. A lot of the things that you said in the presentation have been spot on, brilliant, but they're not Scrum. That's different professional behaviour from a software development point of view, because that's what we're talking about. Scrum, in its essence, 3 accountabilities, 3 commitments, 3 artifacts, 5 events. I didn't talk about lost. It doesn't tell you anything about planning. It just says 3 accountabilities, here's what they are, these are the artifacts, these are the events. Daily stand-up has never been part of Scrum. It's an extreme program. So,
It also doesn't say it's releasable. It's
no,
releasable.
it's releasable. Because you might, as a business, decide actually this is critical. Sorry, this is critical that we don't release. You just need to be releasable because your client might say, "I need that now. Are you ready to go?" It doesn't talk about documentation. That means it's the professionalism of the individual. So I love your talk. There's not much about Scrum.
So I would say the thing that I think you probably can criticise Scrum for is your last slide, that last point about reform. You know, there's loads and loads of teams get to a point where they feel they can execute a kind of Scrum-like process and then kind of relax. And I'd say that's the missing bit of Scrum really, is that it you shouldn't be relaxed.
Sorry, there was one more.
And then mine was pretty much the same. It was just like a lot of that stuff it was saying just wasn't Scrum. And like I was very good kind of James Club kind of Scrum pattern was top that was doing. Where it's like user stories aren't part of Scrum, they've never been Scrum, stuff like that. So lots of stuff get attributed to Scrum. What there's like very poor understanding even when people say practice Scrum of what Scrum actually is. And understanding it's like
Right. So everything you've said, I've never heard before, right? I've had Scrum Master, Scrum Expert, which had qualification coming out of the wazoos. None of that. So there is. I'm not saying I'm right. I could be wrong, and I'm happy to be proven wrong. But Scrum has a life of its own. And whether it's what was intended or not, that life is there. And when you talk about Scrum, that's a thing that people understand. Is it good? No. Is it what it is? Yeah, it kind of is. CI/CD, I've seen CI/CD said, it's the automatic test that the GitHub runs. Yeah, that's not what CI or CD mean. Continuous integration, continuous deployment. But this term has been overloaded now. Am I running out of time?
You're not running out of time quite yet. But
quite yet. Okay. 12 minutes, my God.
You've got 30 seconds.
30 seconds, right. Last one.
So I agree that there is lots of myths and legends about what is actually in Scrum and what isn't in Scrum. I think part of it is because of the certifications. They shoehorn a lot of stuff in, so people come out thinking they are certified Scrum, but actually they're not. They are adopting practices that they don't really understand the origin of. But the point that I wanted to make, which I thought was being touched on multiple times, is part of the reason that business isn't as... They see Agile as a delivery, a technical delivery methodology or way of doing stuff. They don't see it as a business way of working. I think part of the problem is the planning and budgeting funding model that the business has. It needs to be done on an annually basis. And so then when you break that down into quarterly goals and chunks, and then you break that down again, that's why the cycle of Scrum applies in businesses. And I think that sounds great because we'll be able to just get lots of more stuff done in these increments, and they ladder up to a bigger whole. They don't understand that actually you want to work in an agile way, to someone's point earlier, about being able to be flexible. That means that you don't commit a year in advance about what you're supposed to be trying to deliver and have the appropriate funding in place to deliver what you're trying to agree a year up front. You've got to move that model onwards. And that's where a lot of businesses don't understand that that model needs to change for you to actually be agile. It's not an engineering delivery capability.
So I think that hits the point right on the nail. A lot of VC and investors will look at a company in terms of what they can produce, how much they can grow, how much share of the market they can gain. They care very little about how it's done. They just want results yesterday because they want their money magnified 100-fold, 1,000-fold. And so a lot of the founders, especially the ones which are not technical, will push for that. And will go, pot of gold, pot of gold, pot of gold, because they have these VCs which have invested a ton of money on their backs, breathing down their neck and going, where's my money? And okay, they're not going to send people to break their legs, depending on your view of lawyers, but there is an impetus to deliver quickly. And for bigger companies, they have slowed that down, but they still have this drive of monetization. This is why I think tech debt should be renamed business debt, and we should be using business debt now. Because business debt puts a monetary value on that work. Otherwise, it's just bad code that the developers messed up and we can fire 20% of them because they're rubbish, because we have all that tech debt. Hi, Elon. That's what happens in most American companies. There were Google, Microsoft, Apple. They've just had a massive layoff. Meta, they had massive layoff of people. Google has about 10 steps of interviews, and they're still hiring thousands of sub-performant people? Yeah, give me a break, you're lying. No, you're just getting rid of them because you're incompetent. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you very much for participating, and thank you very much for your insight.